Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Untold Tales from This Side of Nowhere. As you already know, I'm your host, Connor Jones, and I am bringing you a story from northern Wyoming and my experiences. Well, let's be honest. These stories are based on my experiences growing up in the tiny town of Poverty Flats. This week's episode is sponsored by Basins Market, located in Basin, Wyoming. Basins Market is your destination for groceries, fresh produce, and the best meat department in the Bighorn Basin. Come in and sample their wide selection of products Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Sundays from noon to 6 p.m. We are also sponsored here on the show by the Wyoming Welcome Program. The folks at the Wyoming Welcome Program are excited to announce a new service called Table Talk. They place brochures on restaurant tables in Cody and Powell that are filled with fun facts about Wyoming, jokes, and the month's holidays. In addition to this information, they include advertisements from local businesses. So, if you're interested in being included in a Table Talk brochure and getting your business name out there, please send them an email. Their service is affordable and effective, so you can contact them at HaleyJ, that's HALEYJ, at wyomingwelcome.com. And now the podcast. Well, it's really warmed up here in northern Wyoming, and things have stayed green. It's been raining all week. I don't recall an early summer like this since, I don't know, back in 2008 we had a really wet spring. But no, it's been raining just about every single night. I'm sure the baseball players appreciate it, breaking up their practices and disrupting games, but every farmer is more than happy to accept some extra rain. This morning, I hope you don't hear a little bit of children's TV show in the background. My son is in the other room watching like Giggle Buddies or something. But if you hear a short lesson on the ABCs, you know where that's coming from. Well, today's story is, it's not one of my more pleasant listens, I would say. If you have a weak stomach, you might want to hold on to your seat for this story. But I promise it will be humorous, and I really enjoyed writing it. I'm excited to share it with you guys. So without further ado, I give you The Voyage of the Vomit Comet. Anyone who has been to Wyoming knows long distances separate every tiny town in the state. I lived for a couple of years in Southern California while serving as a missionary, and what surprised me most was perhaps just the sheer number of people and buildings. While growing up in the West, where in some places a person could drive for 2 hours without seeing so much as another vehicle, on some interstates in California, you could drive for 2 hours without moving so much as the length of your own vehicle. The city never seemed to end in the Golden State. When I returned home at the end of my missionary service, it was great to be back in a state whose claim to fame was the lack of even a single town that would qualify as a city in any other state. In spite of my affinity for the cowboy state, I did not always love having to drive long distances to get places. Sometimes as a kid, I felt like an interstellar traveler, traversing seemingly infinite spaces between tiny points of light and life. Let's say the distance between Shoshone and Casper. You all know that's never ending. On occasion, I've heard a scale comparison that illustrates distances in our solar system. A science teacher will say, if the sun were the size of a basketball, and I put that basketball at home plate in Yankee Stadium, the Earth would be the size of a pea at the end of the outfield. The farthest planet from the sun would be way out on Long Island. This comparison is meant to impress students, of course, due to the immense distances between celestial bodies in the vast expanse of outer space. The comparison is decidedly less impressive when applied in Wyoming. Well, to put that into perspective, class, the Wyoming educator says, if that same basketball were in the middle of Poverty Flats, Wyoming, and the earth were the size of a pea, both of them would still be pretty dang close to the middle of nowhere. My point is, it took a really long time to get anywhere from Poverty Flats. In another story, I mentioned the bench seat of my father's maroon 1997 Ford F-150. As a teenager, the F-150 would be our vehicle of choice for bouncing around the hills during deer season or scrambling over rocks in the mountains. But in its younger days, the trusty old Ford pickup was an interstate traveler. When we moved from Idaho to Wyoming, I would have been around 6 years old, and that experience has left such an impression on my mind, I'm sure a neurosurgeon could stick his finger into it. I've tried to forget about the whole thing, but in spite of intensive therapy, the voyage of the Vomit Comet has never left me. In one final attempt to gain some closure, and on the advice of my therapist, I have recorded the events of that fateful trip here. Most parents who have 6 kids know that you should never travel with all of them in the same vehicle at the same time, unless you are traveling less than 20 minutes or are prepared with some heavy sedatives. But my own parents must have missed that memo. So it was that all 8 of us piled into the 2 rows of seats in the maroon F-150 for the long drive between Wyoming and Idaho, which can only be compared in distance to that of the trip taken by Christopher Columbus in 1492, just with 1 ship rather than 3. Dad manned the wheel, and Mom sat by the passenger door with 2 kids wedged between them on the front bench. The other 4 Jones children were crammed onto the bench in the back seat, with just enough room between them to make sure no one suffocated. All the cliches about sardines in a can or peas in a pod fail entirely to describe this arrangement, given that the subjects in both of those expressions at least have the relieving guarantee of ending their suffering by getting eaten. We had no such hope for escape. At first, the drive was pleasant enough. Dad played one of his favorite tapes, an Alabama album, and we passed the time singing along to 18-Wheeler, Song of the South, and other favorites as we drove across southern Idaho. Mom was in her element, distributing snacks and nipping potential arguments in the bud. "I heard that," she would yell. Or if the occupants of the back bench got too rowdy, "Don't make me come back there." This was no idle threat either. I've seen a grown woman go over the back of a row of seats to dole out some well-deserved thumps or treats as the occasion requires. I don't know how mothers do it, quite frankly. Every time I ride in the passenger seat, I inevitably make some error in judgment, giving the wrong water bottle to the wrong person, a transgression that is sure to result in a lot of screaming, or I dump a bag of Cheerios while passing it to the back seat. Someone always ends up crying, and most of the time it's me. Before long, my wife has to interfere. "Dear, it doesn't matter if you had that water bottle first. Would you stop screaming? Oh, why did I let you ride shotgun? I'm pulling over. You drive." I'm much more comfortable in the driver's seat, where all I have to do is worry about a steering wheel, which responds much more readily to my demands than children, making it easier for me to respond to the demands of my wife. Aside from that, I'm probably still recovering from the lingering memories of what happened on the second leg of our journey from Idaho to Wyoming. We had just driven through Teutonia, Idaho, and were approaching the Wyoming border when the first hint of trouble reared its ghastly head. "Hey, Mom," Fred said. "My stomach hurts." Right away, Mom's instincts were piqued. "Do we need to stop? Should we find a bathroom? Maybe you ate too many licorice." "I don't know," Fred replied, looking slightly green. "Well, look out the window," Mom suggested. This wasn't so easy for Fred to do, since he was wedged between me and Mom in the front seat, and he had to lean forward to look around her. Even then, his view was mainly of the sky and the occasional mountain peak, since he was so short he couldn't look straight out the window. As we headed up the Jackson Pass, the F-150 groaned under the strain of hauling half our worldly possessions up the steep incline. Behind us, the load of boxes swayed slightly on the white double-axle trailer with each curve of the road. Before long, Fred's face had turned a shade of green that would have camouflaged him well in any rainforest. To make matters worse, he had started moaning and rocking a little bit. "Fred, are you okay?" Dad asked, glancing nervously toward his oldest son. "You're looking a little green around the gills." Fred groaned in response. "I think I'm gonna puke." Now, for those of you who have a twin sibling, you know what I mean when I say Fred and I shared everything. From toys to clothes to underwear and even the occasional toothbrush, twin brothers have all things in common. Fred and I were best friends, and remain so to this day, but at that moment, I would have given anything to be anywhere but wedged next to Fred on that bench seat. "Mom!" I screeched. "We need a bucket!" If you are currently eating, or plan on doing so in the next 48 hours or so, you might not want to listen to this next bit. In desperation, Mom reached for the only thing she could find: my hat. Whipping the 49ers ball cap from my head, Mom pushed it in front of my ailing twin brother's face, and just in time. With a sound that can only be described as a cross between a garbage disposal and a pig squeal, Fred erupted. As you can imagine, sharing a seatbelt with Fred was not very fun for about 15 seconds. I personally would have preferred being strapped in with a grizzly bear, but I had no such choice. When Fred was done, a shocked silence filled the cab of the truck. "My hat!" I finally squeaked. "Sorry," Fred croaked in reply. Then the girls in the back seat started screaming, and the raunchy, acidic stench that filled the truck threatened to overwhelm its occupants. "Pull over!" Mom yelled. "Agreed," Dad responded. Fortunately for Dad, we were approaching the "Welcome to Wyoming" sign, and there was just enough room for us to get off the road and pile out. I don't know if there's a Guinness World Record for the fastest time a family of 8 evacuated a pickup truck, but I doubt it holds a candle to our performance. Before the load had quit swaying, all 8 Joneses were huddled on the side of the road. Fred looked miserable. "Dad, I want to go home," Candace wailed. "We are going home," Dad replied. "We've just got a 5-hour drive ahead of us." All 3 members of the trio of trouble and little Annie burst into tears. "Hold on," Dad said. "It's going to be okay. Everyone back in the truck." It took some time to convince everyone to get back into the F-150, which was well on its way to earning the infamous title of the Vomit Comet. But Mom and Dad finally got us all wedged back into our seats. "Are you sure about this?" Beatrice asked uncertainly. "Absolutely," Dad countered. Turning up the stereo, he pulled back onto the highway, crooning, "Roll on, family, roll on through. Roll on, mama, like I asked you to do. And roll on, 18-wheeler, roll on." All of us cringed and adjusted the 55-gallon plastic garbage bags Dad had spread across our laps. At that moment, Otto seemed so far away, it might as well have been the moon. 5 minutes after resuming our journey, Fred started producing more ominous noises. "Are you going to be sick?" Mom asked. "Yes," I replied. Fred groaned and heaved up some lunch. I won't describe how it feels to be holding one side of the garbage bag while your twin brother evacuates the contents of his stomach, nor will I describe the sound and smell. it is enough to make even the most stalwart traveler's stomach churn. And being considerably less than stalwart, it was enough to make me and most of the Jones kids sick to their stomachs as well. Bleh! I retched beside Fred. Ah! Screeched Alice as Candace got sick too. Pretty soon, the garbage bags in both the front and back bench were receiving some pretty unpleasant deposits. Dad gritted his teeth and removed a sizable chunk of his hair, then rolled down his window and cranked the stereo up as loud as it would go. Alabama cheered the Joneses on as the Vomit Comet, full of sound and fury, streaked across the vast expanse of outer space, separating one tiny Wyoming town from another. Much of the voyage of the Vomit Comet has been erased from my memory, but as I mentioned before, it has made quite an impression on me. My apologies if it has now made too much of an impression on you. We did eventually reach Poverty Flats, south of Otto, Wyoming. Somewhere around DuBois, the Jones kids finally fell asleep and Mom was able to extract the garbage bags with their foul contents from the press of children. How my parents did it, I will never know. Now, as I drive around Wyoming with my own kids, assisted by in-vehicle movies and tablets and smartphones, I think back to that experience when I was a young lad. Interstellar travel sure has come a long way. It's much easier to occupy little minds with a movie, but sometimes I take a trip down memory lane, and I miss the days when the staticky radio station and an old cassette tape, a good conversation, or a game of I Spy were the only things that kept us occupied while we crossed the stretches of desert and sagebrush. I miss being new to the world, so that the world was new to me. The days when I was just experiencing Wyoming for the first time, and seeing each new mountain range was like discovering a new planet, and each little town was an exciting relief from the long monotony of driving across the least populous state in the Union. Yes, traveling isn't what it used to be. Age, experience, and technology have ruined some things for me, I suppose. That being said, last month on a trip to Utah, when my son Al Jr. was afflicted with a stomach bug, I started getting flashbacks to the way things used to be. I don't feel so good, Al Jr. mumbled, the phone in his hands sinking down to his lap. His face was a shade of green that would have camouflaged him well in any rainforest. Alarms started screaming, and warning lights flashed in his daddy's brain. "Lily, he's gonna be sick," I blurted out. "Well, do something," my wife yelled back. "I'm driving." Frantically, I searched the front of the car for anything that I could use to catch the mess that was gurgling in my 3-year-old stomach. The little baggie of Cheerios I had spilled was too small, and I doubted any of the water bottles that had caused so much contention would do the trick. "Why did you let me sit here?" I wailed. My crying was only drowned out by Al Jr.'s screeching. "Daddy!" he moaned. Thank goodness for Maverick's plastic sacks. If they ever ask if you want a bag, the correct answer is yes. "Is that all of it?" Lily asked me. "I hope so," I groaned. "You sure make a lot of noise when you throw up, dear," Lily said. "Now what is Junior going to use when he gets sick?" "Do we have any 55-gallon garbage sacks?" I asked, tying off the bag. "Why would we?" Lily asked. "No reason," I said. "Say, do you have any Alabama on your phone's playlist? Junior has my phone." "I think so," Lily replied. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, I just think this would be a good time to listen to 18-Wheeler. There you have it, another story, an untold tale from this side of nowhere. I'm sure there are some great car travel and car sickness experiences out there, and I would love to hear from you. So if you have an experience traveling vast expanses of the western states, or an unfortunate experience involving car sickness, make sure to send me an email. My email address is untoldtalesthepodcast@gmail.com, or you can comment on our Facebook page. That's Untold Tales from This Side of Nowhere on Facebook. And we'd love to hear any story that you might have. Now, hopefully you can still eat today, and I didn't mar your appetite too much with this story. But it sure has been a great time here with you, sharing another story, and I look forward to the next time. So, as always, this has been Untold Tales from This Side of Nowhere, where we work twice as hard for half as much and still find time for the important things, like fishing. Catch you next time.